thank you to Devnexus. If you know or have seen or have ran into any of the organizers or the volunteers, please tell them thank you. Thank you for putting this on. The AV people that are making this happen, tell them thank you. It is part of them is the reason why we have events, right? There's something deep down inside where we all want to be together. 2020 was a shit show. We know that. Everything kind of went downhill, but we're back together in person, and it's amazing. So if you have a chance, make sure that you thank everybody that's here that is making this possible. Also, thank the sponsors as well. I know everybody likes to go by and grab swag and grab this and grab that, grab the other thing, right? If you thank the sponsors, that means the world to them. Because it's also because of the sponsors. If it wasn't for sponsors, we wouldn't have events, right? There'd be no community. These things need funding. They need presence. So when you do get a chance, thank the sponsors. And also, if you're on Twitter, so who's on Twitter? Raise your hand. Cool. So if you are tweeting, taking pictures, the sort, Devnexus is the official handle for the event, the hashtag for the event. So if you're tweeting, throw that on there as well. It helps to track engagement, see who's here. Maybe you have a friend that's here that you didn't know was here, and they tweet, and you're like, oh, hey, what's good? Let's get a beer or a pop or whatever. Yep, I say pop. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. We don't call it soda. It is pop. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry. Pop. That's right. There you go. Also, I love the developer community. Everybody here is the reason why I do what I do. I don't just come here just for fun. I come here to see friends. I come here to make friends. I come here to build relationships. I come here to teach. I come here to mentor. I come here because of everybody in this room. This is a safe space. What happens in these four walls can stay in these four walls. I might crack some jokes. I want you to crack on me. If you don't think my jokes are funny, that's fine. I do have one big rule, though, and my rule is do not be a jerk. Because if you are a jerk in my room, I have no problem booting you out of this room. There's 2 exits. They're wide open. I have 0 qualms about kicking you out of my room if you are a jerk. So please don't be a jerk. We've all been through enough shit over the past few years. We don't need anybody giving anybody else shit. We savvy on that? Good. Hashtag developer community when you're tweeting as well. I play this video before every accessibility talk I give, before every accessibility workshop that I give. It's from Apple. I am not sponsored by Apple. I'm not getting endorsed by Apple. They're not paying me to play this for you. But I do it for a reason. And I want to talk about those reasons once it's over. Hopefully everybody can hear.
People think that having a disability is a barrier. But that's not the way I see it. You can catch up with friends.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
And you can start the day bright and early. You can take a trip to somewhere new. You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
You can take the long way home. Or edit a film like this one. When technology is designed for everyone, it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
Why is this video so powerful? If you shout out any answer that comes to mind, why do you think this video is so powerful? Inclusive, what else? Shows the human element. Yep, what else? No limit. I love that. What else? It shows that we are bigger than what we are building. All too many times we build stuff that we think is cool, right? Or a branding team thinks it's cool, or a marketing team thinks it's cool. Maybe at the end of the day, it's not useful for everybody else out there. We're not building multiple experiences for different types of people. We are building one experience that should be accessible for everyone. Now, when I started building on the web, I started building many, many, many moons ago. The stuff I was building was not accessible whatsoever, right? But I thought it was sweet. Like, where are my Angel Fire GeoCities people? All right. When I started building on those platforms and that hosting, Windows 95 machine in Notepad, an OG Notepad, I used to build stuff that was horribly inaccessible. But 11-year-old Chris didn't know any better, right? But I thought it was cool. By today's standards, that would not work at all. We may be the user at the end of the day, but that is the bigger picture. One accessible user experience for everyone. Why? I get this question every now and then. I get it when I'm being interviewed. Why do you care so much about accessibility, Chris? The answer for me is easy. I don't like using that term easy, but it's easy for me. My mom is a boomer. She'll be 66 next month. She's a 2-time cancer survivor. Scrappy, about this tall. Grew up in Detroit. She's been through the thick and thin of it. You don't want to cross her. But she has glasses, so she has trouble seeing. And now she also was diagnosed with macular degeneration of one eye. I'll get into that later. But she takes medicine now to kind of halt that process. Macular degeneration means once you lose your eye, the sight in your eye, you are not getting it back. It does not come back. That is a low vision disability. Low vision and poor vision are two separate things. Poor vision can be corrected, contacts, glasses, LASIK. Low vision cannot be corrected. Color vision deficiencies or color blindness, field of view, macular degeneration, those types of things. I have to talk really loud for her to hear me sometimes because her hearing is starting to go. Her bones crack when she walks. She's got severe arthritis. It runs in our family. I could tell her I was giving this talk today at 3:40 in Atlanta. I could have told her that yesterday. She could have called me 20 minutes ago and said, hey, what are you doing? No recollection that I told her I was giving a talk today at 3:40 in Atlanta, Georgia. But she could remember something from March 13th, 1977, like that. Now, that was the month and the date I was born, but not the year. Place, time, people she was with, outfit she was wearing, beer she was drinking, cigarette she was smoking. She could remember it all. Now, she doesn't have any type of temporary impairments that are physical, that you can visibly see. A lot of hidden. I also have hidden. I have a lot of hidden impairments. So she has four out of the five main types of disabilities that we try to be cognizant and try to be aware of when we're building on the web. Now, if I can make an accessible user experience for her at the end of the day, I have done my job as a worker on the web. Now, I've gotten a lot of controversial debates with people that don't agree with what I say, but I'm going to say it anyways. It is a moral obligation to care about what we are doing. Whether you're a designer, developer, backend, frontend, QA, BA, PO, PM, stakeholder, I don't care. It is your job to care about these things. Hopefully, if you didn't know what your why was, maybe after this talk, and I hope after this talk, you might be able to reflect. And maybe something will spark your why. Could be you. Could be your family, partner, child, anything. That's me. My name is Chris. I am Salt and Burnham on Twitter. If you are a Supernatural fan, you will understand that reference. If you were a Supernatural fan, you'll understand. Who likes Supernatural? Raise your hand. I know you do. No other this is like a nerd conference, right? Like, what's going on here? Buffy? Any Buffy fans? Okay. Charmed? New Charmed or old Charmed? Old Charmed. Old Charmed. Okay. Gotcha. What about, huh? No, there is no new. What about Stranger Things? Who's excited for season 4? Hopper's alive. Spoiler alert. I work at Rocket Mortgage. I was previous DevRel at Rocket Mortgage. I'm getting a title change, so I'm just going to tell you I'm a builder of the web. I've been a builder of the web in Michigan, in Detroit for 26 years, and that is what I do. I did have a couple slides on me as a person to kind of tell you, like, hey, I'm just not a robot trying to like bore you to death with PowerPoint. I don't use PowerPoint. I use Keynote. But I got some feedback one time from an event, and the feedback was like, hey, Chris, we don't care about you. We care about your talk. And that hit me in the feels kind of hard. I was really upset about it because I'm like, hey, I do all this work for the community, and they just don't care about me as a person. Nobody wants to talk to me after the conference or like hang out. So I took all that stuff out, and then years go on. I'm like, you know what? At this point, I don't care anymore. So I added it all back in. A little bit more about me. I'm an international speaker. I love horror movies and spooky stuff, and I love tattoos, if you couldn't tell. I mean, I hold accolades and awards in multiple community programs. I am a GDE with Google, a Microsoft MVP, Media Developer Expert with Cloudinary, Auth0 Ambassador with Auth0, and I'm also part of the Progress Ninja program at Progress. Now let me see where I'm at with these slides. Cool. Awesome. I'm going to finish from up here. Thank you all for coming to this talk. Aria, a Grande method of accessible markup. There's a handful of talks going on right now. You chose to be in mine, so I greatly appreciate that. Question time. Just to make sure that's still going. Question time. If I were to ask you, and Todd, you can't answer this, how many people do you think around the world have some type of disability out of the 5, not limited to the 5 I discussed, which is hearing, visual, cognitive, mobility, and temporary, or invisible, but how many people around the world do you think have one of those type of disabilities? Shout it out. I got an answer last week when I was at a conference, 2 different talks. I did this one, and the answer, I've never heard it before, and it was a great answer, which is very true. But what do you think? Give me a number. You've seen my accessibility talks too, again. You can't say anything. What do you think? Come on. Drop me a number. Let's get live. We're at Devnexus. Did you see these slides beforehand, guy? 1 billion people around the world, give or take, have some type of disability out of those 5, but not limited to those 5. 1 billion. So that kind of breaks down to 20 to 25%. I'm sure these numbers are different. I got these numbers last year from the WHO. I know they're different this year because we have gone through so much with COVID. Just tons and tons and tons of things that have happened have probably escalated this number. 20 to 25% doesn't seem like a big number when you look at it in a percentage, right? But you translate that back to 1 billion, that's a lot of people. Like, have you ever been in a room with 1 billion people? I haven't. There's probably a bunch of people here, but not 1 billion. This is a lot of people. And I do a lot of events. This is a lot of people. And this is post-COVID. Pre-COVID, this event specifically, like, Gant, you know, there was a lot of people for Devnexus. 20 to 25%. But our tools are internal, Chris. We don't need to make them accessible. Nobody in our organization has a disability. Oh, really? Is that so? Well, I have worked with developers on teams that are colorblind. I have worked with QAs and BAs that are colorblind that would fail your stuff in a heartbeat because they can't see the color. I worked with a developer who was deaf in one ear. So if we didn't provide transcripts or closed captions, she wasn't having it. You have to internalize that 20 to 25%. I call BS every time somebody says, our people don't have disabilities. Nobody's going to come up to you and say, hey, I'm Chris, I'm colorblind. I'm not colorblind. They don't have to give you that information. That is not they don't have to. That's not their responsibility. In no way, right, or form, according to the ADA, any type of law, they have to disclose that information to you. Internalize that 20 to 25%. I am sure you work with somebody that has some type of disability. You might not know it, but they probably do. Who has heard this term before? A11Y or ALI? Okay. Now, I'm going to ask a specific question. The combination of numbers and letters, do you know what the name, the technical name of this combination of numbers and letters is called? I hope this works from here because I can't see my screen. Do you know anybody? It's called a numeronym. And what a numeronym is you take, is this going to work? Is that on the A? Nope, see, I knew that wasn't going to work. Is it on the A now? See, you got me all messed up over here. I'm going to come down there. This spotlight's janky sometimes. There, where? Can't, does yours do this? You take the first letter, you take the last letter, you count the numbers in between, and you get your numeronym. You have seen numeronyms in the wild elsewhere. Who works with internationalization? I-18N, that's a numeronym. Who works with localization? L10N, that's a numeronym. Who works in Kubernetes space? K8S, that is a numeronym. So anytime you come across these, you could be like, yo, Chris told me what that means, and now I know. It's a numeronym. And your team's going to be like, whoa, I didn't even know that was a thing. It's a numeronym. Trust me, it'll happen. What is accessibility? The best question, let's form a little bit better. What is web accessibility? So according to the W3, and I don't agree with what the W3 has to say. Sorry, Todd. The W3 says that web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. I don't like that. That's very exclusive and limiting, right? It doesn't say anything about everybody. It says only people with disabilities can use the web. This is much better. This is from me. Web accessibility means that everyone can use the web. Everybody should be able to have the same exact amazing, accessible user experience. It should not matter whether you have a disability or not. And if you're using accessibility overlays, don't. You want to know more about that? Talk to this guy up front in the blue shirt. He will talk about accessibility overlays and why they are trash all day long. Don't do it. Like I was saying, if you have your hand in any piece of the pie, of the cake, of the web experience that you're building, one experience, amazing and accessible for everybody. So let's get into like the meat of this talk. We're going to talk a little bit about Aria. There is tons of stuff that is in the spec about Aria. Some of the stuff I want to talk about, I've never seen in the wild, but I want to talk about it because it means a lot. If you want to go and learn more about this, you can just Google it. Mozilla Developer Network has a bunch of info on Aria, but you definitely want to go to the W3 and check out the specs for Aria. So Aria, what does that mean? Well, what it stands for is accessible, rich internet applications, right? This is like the definition of the W3. I don't want to bore you with it. You can read it if you want. Defines a way to make web content, web applications more accessible. It kind of gives a little extra zhuzh to your front-end stack to make that experience accessible when there is no inherent semantics and inherent accessibility properties and principles. Aria. It helps AT effectively navigate all parts of a page when semantics can't be determined. That's pretty much what Aria is in a nutshell, right? But we do have a rule, right? We have like the one ring to rule them all, right? We have one rule to rule them all. Does anybody know what the first rule of Aria is? You are close, my friend. What, anybody know? Don't use Aria. Now you're going to be like, Chris, I came to see you talk about Aria, and you're telling me not to use this stuff. Why am I here? Well, you should be using semantic markup first. Automatically out of the gate, you should be using semantic markup to build your web experiences. If you're not, you need to go back to the book, Web Dev 101, and figure out how to do that. Or we can talk. There's plenty of us here that know about semantic markup and proper HTML structure and the things you should be using. What do you mean semantic markup, Chris? I use divs. Don't do that. stop using divs altogether, unless you have to, which we'll get into that, because a div doesn't have any semantic meaning. There is no inherent accessibility properties and principles behind that. Semantic markup by default is accessible. What does that mean? Well, you should be using a header for your header element, not to be confused with an H1, an H2, H3, all the way to H6. H1 to H6 is a heading level element. It has nothing to do with structure of the page. It defines section of the page like an outline, right? When I say header, I'm talking about the thing that in the top that holds your logo and your nav. Nav is another semantic element. You should be using nav when you're building out your navigation. You nest an unordered list full of list items in the navigation with anchor tags, boom, navigation. You have a main component, a main element, where you put all of the main stuff that is between the header and the footer in there. You should be using main, not a div. Unless you have some like wrapper stuff that you need to do with a div, that's fine and dandy because the wrapper is just a wrapper. There is no semantic element for like a wrapper. But definitely use main. Inside main, what do you use? You use sections, you use asides, you use articles, you use all of these things. Form, you use a button. If you are doing anything with interaction, you use a button. Don't use a link for a button and vice versa. You cannot do that. That is inherently unsemantic and inherently inaccessible. Don't do it. But please use a button for buttons and action. Anchor links are for navigation only. Footer. We have a footer element. Anything that goes in a footer, put that in a footer element. We have the address element. That will format stuff for address. We have small. All of these things that you can take advantage of to build out an amazing accessible user experience, and you don't need a div, or you don't need spans, right? You only use divs when you're building out those custom things. Then you bake Aria into that so that it can be accessible for your users. Kind of like what Gant said. It's like Fight Club. You do not talk about Fight Club. You don't use Aria. So these are just different attributes, Aria attributes that you can put on an element to help with semantics. We have roles, states, properties, and we also have managing focus. A lot of stuff in this, a lot of stuff. So we have our roles, right? Main indicator of type. This is letting those elements, those divs, know that, hey, this is a role of this, and this is what it's supposed to do. It will announce it to your screen readers. So we have some role types. We have abstract role types. We have widget role types. We have document structure role types, landmark, live region. We have window roles. For the abstract roles, and this kind of is just used for like ontology purposes. If you're the author of this experience, you don't use these in content specifically. We have the command, and like a lot of this stuff, like I was saying, a lot of this stuff, it's all in the spec. There is tons and tons of information on accessibility. If you were to look up WAI-ARIA, WAI is Web Accessibility Initiative-ARIA, all of this stuff will come up. And then you could get into conformance levels with WCAG. If you go down the WCAG rabbit hole, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which you should be following, 2.1 at level conformance AA. That's what you should be hitting, no questions asked. If you're hitting A, great, you're supposed to hit A. AAA, you're probably not going to get to it unless you work in academia or you work for like some type of government. You will never hit AAA. The reasons being, it costs a lot of money, costs a lot of resources, it costs a lot of overhaul and initiative to get that done. For an example, when it comes to that AAA conformance level, let's say you put a video on the web, right? YouTube, it don't matter, whatever. Vimeo, YouTube, it doesn't matter. Or like a live recording of something like this, perhaps. Okay, great, fine and dandy. We got video, sweet. We also have to have closed captions with that, right? It's like I was showing the Apple video. Closed captioning, that has to be provided. Then you start getting into VPAT, right? And that's a whole other thing. You also have to have transcripts that can be downloaded for those. I used to host a podcast called Tales from the Script. Todd hosts a podcast, Front End Nerdery. We have to have transcripts for these podcasts, especially being accessibility people. No one coming from the accessibility space is going to listen to your podcast unless you provide transcripts. Well, not only do you need transcripts in closed captioning, you also have to have an accompanying video of somebody doing ASL. All of those things and probably more. Todd would know more about that space than I do. Like, this is what Todd does in his day-to-day. He's an accessibility engineer. Like, that's what he does. I also do the same thing, but I specialize in a couple other things as well. My bread and butter is accessibility. But there's a lot of things that go into those experiences if you need to hit AAA. You're not going to be bound to hit AAA. You're not going to get sued for not hitting AAA. If you don't hit AA, you have a 110% chance of getting sued. Multiple places. Bank of America has been sued a handful of times. I know that like Domino's has been sued. Red Roof Inn has been sued. Maybe the company you've worked for has been sued. That's just the way it happens. That's just the way it happens. AA is where you want to be. WCAG 2.1 AA is what you want to hit. All right, off on a tangent. So we have the input abstract roles, landmarks. I like landmarks a lot. I'll really get into landmarks here in a little bit. Select for your options and your semantic drop downs that you can use. Structure, we have widget, and we have more. And then these widget roles, these act as standalone interfaces for stuff that out of the box does not come with HTML, right? So if you're building something that's custom, chances are you're going to be using some of these roles and states and properties in that experience. Like a button, for instance. A button, by default, is semantic. By default, has its own inherent properties and principles. But depending on the application, you might have to do something with that button. Link, you have option, which is just like a select and a drop down. You have multiple options in that select. Radio, for radio buttons. Tab, if like you have a tabbed interface and you have to go back and forth through tabs. We don't have native tabs in HTML. It's not a thing yet. So if you're building out a custom experience that uses tabs, and it's all standard HTML, CSS, maybe a little JavaScript, you need to bake in Aria to make sure that your user knows what tab they're on and that they can get back to the tab they were at prior. Does that make sense? Cool. We have text box. Text box, usually you'll see that inside a form, right? A text area. I think it could be any type of text box. Fact check me on that, though, Todd, later. And then there's more. We have the document roles and responsibilities. We have article, we have a directory, we have a figure. So does anybody use figure when they're writing, they're building images, putting image elements in their markup? Figure's a good one. Figure has inherent properties as well. You could add a fig caption to that. That is not like an alt attribute. That's something totally different. But you can use those things, and you can use those with couple that with source set to serve down different size images based on the viewport in the browser. Really, really dope stuff. Your image. We have these for the image element. Tables. Who remembers building tables, websites out of tables back in the day, right? We used tables and spacer GIFs. Like, that was fun. That was fun. Or we use frames, right? The original sticky sidebar or sticky header, sticky footer used a frame without a border. That was the OG. Now you can do that stuff with Flexbox nowadays. But back in the day, that's how we did it. You want something to stay in place? Use a frame without a border. You're good to go. Who cared about cross-site scripting at that point? Not me. Table, tooltip, and more. Tooltip, not to be confused with a pop-up. It's very much two different things. Tooltips are formatted differently than pop-ups. Pop-ups are actually widgets that would just come from the system you're using. Like if you're a Bootstrap or a Foundation, if you use Bootstrap or Foundation, I'm sorry, but they have those built-in tooltips and pop-ups, right? A tooltip is like a tooltip. They have that in HTML. They're just a tooltip. But you can add these Aria principles to those to make those accessible to your users. And then we have landmarks. Now, these are types of regions if you want quick access to the page, right? So these are all contained within the markup if you cannot use your semantic markup. We have a banner. Now, the equivalent to the banner is the header, You should be using a header. You don't have to use header and role equals banner. You don't have to do that, okay? But let's say you have multiple headers. Maybe you might have multiple headers, who knows? And you don't want to keep using the header. You can use a role, a banner. If that header is something custom that you're trying to do, where it doesn't make sense to use the header, then you can throw a landmark, a role of banner, and that will read to the user from the screen reader, role equals banner, this is what this is in this experience. We have content info. This is the same thing as the footer for the most part. I've only ever seen content info used in footers. And usually it's when people are writing footer and doing a role of content info, which you don't have to do that either. That goes back to the header banner thing. If you are using semantic markup, you're using a footer, use footer. If you're not, let's say you have multiple footers, then you can use content info, because that's an adjacent piece of content that's in that same area. A form is accessible by default. You should be using a form. Don't use a div to build out your forms. Use form elements, right? Make sure it's in a form, for one. Make sure that you're using labels and inputs with proper ID and for attributes. So those label and inputs can be linked together for your user. So if they don't want to click on the input, they just want to click on the label, the focus will shift to the input, and the user knows that that label is associated with that input, and they can start typing. It'll be announced through the screen reader to interact with this, start typing, etc. Text area is the same thing. Label with the text area ID and for, so that way your user knows that that text area is associated with that label in that form, and you have your buttons, right? We have main. Main is a good one, but this also goes back to the markup. If you're using main in your markup, you do not need a role of main. Now, there are some sticky situations out there, whether you're using like a content management system, not even a content management system. Yeah, content management system, we'll say that, content management system. I was thinking of web content management system, but that's a product by Big Blue that they used to have years ago. That might spit out non-semantic markup, right? And if it does and you have no way of changing it, there might be some tricks you can do, but you'd have to add a role of main to that so that the user knows this is where I'm at in this experience. It is the main section of this experience or application. Navigation is another one. Let's say you have multiple pieces of navigation, but you have a main nav and you use a nav element. You would use navigation, a role of navigation, so that way when a screen reader focuses to that, it will announce to the user that this is a navigation element, or this has a role of navigation, this is what this is, and then you can interact with that using the keyboard. Search, for search bar, we don't have a native search in HTML at all, so your chances are you're building a search out of a div, right? And maybe you have like rounded corners on that. So you have border radius. If you're a CSS person like me, border radius is one of the best inventions in CSS next to grid and flexbox and CSS custom properties and all the new stuff that's coming. But border radius was awesome when it started back in the day. If you want a border radius when I started, you had to build that in Photoshop, slice it up, put it back together with a table and some spacer GIFs, and then you'd have a border radius on a button or like some type of input, whatever. Chances are there's a search icon there. Chances are that search icon doesn't have any ARIA principles either, or inherent accessibility principles. So you already have to add ARIA to it. You would add ARIA label. Search, a role of search is what you would use in those cases. And then there's more. Like I could make 4 slides out of each one of these. Then we have live regions. Live regions are really cool. Let's say that you have a stock ticker, right? Or you're like watching NFTs. Like, is anybody in NFTs? Like, I don't even know how it works. Like, I really don't know how it works. A buddy of mine, he's like, no, you got to do this, and you got to go like Bitcoin or like Coinbase and sign up and like buy this and then put that money in here, and then you can use that money because it turns into Ethereum or something, and then you buy the NFT. But like, I can't buy what I want because I don't have that kind of money, right? That is a example. Or if you are a sports fan or any type of fan where there's a score, like that is called a live region because the score can update for you in real time, right? Or who's a fan of the marquee element still? I am. Marquee was deprecated, but it still does work on the web. Does anybody remember Marquee? Yeah? What about Blink? Y'all remember Blink? I want Blink to come back. I do. I want Blink to come back because I loved having like a GIF that said under construction blinking on my site when I was a kid, right? And a marquee going across, under construction, we'll be back soon. But Marquee still works, and that's super cool. Looks like if you put a marquee on your page, and it's got like the Dow, right? I think that's right. Like Wall Street stuff that's going by. That's called a live region. And you can add these properties and principles of Aria to let the user know that things are being updated in real time. It's live. It's happening now. So we have alert, we have log. I've never even seen these in the wild. There's my friend Marquee right there. Status to give you updated statuses. Timer. Timers are bad. If you're using timers in your application, you should probably stop doing that. I don't know about you, but I love concerts. I'm a huge concert fan. I'm a big Red Wings fan, so I go to a lot of hockey games. And I don't like going to Ticketmaster and sucked into having to sit there and being timed to make my purchase. What happens if you get sidetracked, right? Your partner, your kid, anybody in your family needs you right away, and you got these badass tickets. You're ready to go. You're already in line. You go away, and you got so much time, or you don't even know where you want to sit, right? And you're like looking at the screen. You're like, oh, Ticketmaster, let me pick this spot. Hey, what do you want to do? Where do you want to sit? You ask your partner or somebody in your family, and nobody can make up their mind. You're running out of time. Well, not only is that bad for the user, but that can also spark a lot of anxiety, which is one of those hidden disabilities I was talking about, that we still have to be cognizant of, right? Timers are bad, but we have things in place to help us with those experiences. We have the window, alert dialog, and then we have states and properties that you can bolt onto these. We have some global states and properties. Now, I love these. I like talking about these a lot. I use these in some of my demos with other accessibility talks that I give. These help to describe what is happening, what non-contextual elements, what their like definitions are, like what those things are that can't be inherently read out by a screen reader because you're just not using certain elements. Aria describe by is a good one. So let's say that you have a pie chart or like some type of chart. Like I see this a lot with charts, right? And the chart tells you different things. You would add an Aria describe by to that because what that is, it's describing the chart, right? So you might have some text like above it that's like, this is just a estimate from 2017, right? That information is describing what's in that chart if you cannot make that chart accessible, right? It's like if you're not using D3, maybe it's like a static image, but it's something that's giving meaning. Or an infographic, right? Something that's giving meaning that inherently, like you can't write a paragraph of alternative text. You cannot write a paragraph. Alternative text with an alt attribute, short and descriptive. If you need to say more than that, you would use an Aria describe by. That is being described by this chart or this image. Aria has pop-up. I've never seen this before, but it says it has a pop-up, so that is either going to be true or false. I'm sure you've seen a lot more of this stuff in the wild than I have. Aria label, this is one, and this one kind of go hand in hand. Aria label and Aria labeled by. We have two common patterns that you see on the web. They're dark patterns. They're dark UX patterns. One of them is social media components, right? Now, Ray gave a talk prior to me, and when he was coming up in the days of the web, you have a footer on 5 pages, you got to change that information on 5 pages, right? With the advent of single-page applications, Vue, Angular, React, Preact, usually that's one component, and that one component is just included in everything. You change it in one spot, it can update across the board. So let's say you're running your accessibility audit using Axe. Axe is a tool I use from DQ, not Dairy Queen. They're based in Ann Arbor. Let's say you're running an accessibility audit. Let's say you have 4 social media icons in your footer, but you have a handful of pages, so let's say you get 40 errors and they're all the same error. Back in the day, you'd have to go in and fix that 40 separate times or more, right? Today, you fix it in one spot, it will populate across the board. With social media components, 9 times out of 10, it's just an image, right? It's an image of Twitter that's a link. Doesn't say Twitter or Instagram or YouTube. Same thing with modals. Modals have an X in the corner. 9 times out of 10, that's either going to be an image, it's going to be the letter X, or it's going to be the HTML character entity, ampersand times semicolon. That has zero contextual meaning to anybody. So in those cases, you want to add an Aria label. Aria label equals Twitter. Aria label equals LinkedIn. So when the user focuses to that, the screen reader will announce focusable element link Twitter. To interact with this link, Control-Shift-Option. Like I have this stuff memorized from back voiceover. That's when you would use Aria label. Same with the X in a modal. You're going to want to use Aria label equals close or Aria label equals exit. Because that will announce to the user that, hey, this is an interactable element, it's focusable, to interact with this, and it'll say close or exit. Control-Shift-Option, whatever you have set up, it will shift the focus back to the main window, and the modal will go away. Same thing with Aria labeled by. I've used them interchangeably. I know there's a correct way to use one over the other, but if you do get dinged in an audit and it's saying you have non-discernible text, if you throw an Aria labeled by on it, it doesn't work, just take the by off the Aria label and you will pass your audit. And then there's a bunch more in that case. We have widget roles in states and properties. We have Aria checked for checkboxes, true or false, whether it's been checked or not. Disabled for disabled buttons or disabled elements on the page, whether that's true or false. Aria Required, that's another one. That's a standalone. If you're familiar with required, it's pretty much the same thing. You don't have to use both on an HTML element like an input. I always do it just for a fail-safe. So if I have an input, I add a required and also an Aria Required in that element, just to double check myself. That's when you would use that. Aria Hidden, whether it's true or false. If something is false, okay, let the user know it's false, that it's hidden, and then if they need to interact with that and bring it back, they have the controls to make that hidden and turn it into true. And much, much more. We have live regions. Now, I've never seen these either. Homer said he did see these once. We have Aria Atomic. I don't know what that is, to be completely honest. Aria Busy. Something is busy on the page, and it's going to let the user know, I'm assuming. Aria Live. And then we have Aria Relevant. Have you seen any of these in the wild, Todd? You have? Okay, cool. And then we have, huh? Then we have drag and drop states and properties. Aria drop effect. Now this is for like moving stuff around the page, being able to drag and drop stuff like images into like an upload. Let's say that you are arranging your top repos in GitHub and you get a hand when you hover over it to move it around. That is when you would bring these roles and properties in. In grab, letting the user know that it's grabbed and you can move it, or the image was grabbed and it was moved over here to another section of the page. And then relationship. Aria col count, Aria col index, col span, details. I think these are all associated with tables. Okay. And then we have more of those. And then we have what I love talking about is focus, managing focus. I give a talk on focus called Focusing on Focus, and it's all about CSS and accessibility. I'm also a CSS person. I barely write a lick of JS. That's not what I do. I haven't made a career out of writing JavaScript. If you have, more power to you. You're way smarter than I am. Don't do this, please, in your CSS. Do not set your focus outline to 0, and do not set your focus outline to none. Because when you do that, you are removing focus for everybody. Anybody that needs that focus from any type of assistive technology, screen reader, braille machine, sip and puff machine, a tap machine, all of it. Never remove it. If you do remove it, let's say you're just resetting the browser, if you use like a reset like Eric Meyer's reset, make sure you put it back in. And if you do use Eric's reset, it explicitly says in there, please add this back in to match whatever branding or whatever colors you want to do, but it has to go back in. So always kind of keep that in mind too when you're trying to think about focus and managing focus. Make sure that you still have focus in that experience. because your user needs that. This is a great example right here. Is anybody familiar with Two Blind Brothers? Okay, sweet. Does it play? There. So Two Blind Brothers is a pair of brothers. They're brothers. And there's that little simulator in the bottom corner. This is how they see every day. These two have what we call Stargardt's disease, macular degeneration of the eye. This is all they can see is around that spot. Years ago when I used this as a demo, that spot was a lot smaller. It's only going to get worse over time, and they will essentially lose all vision entirely. Now, all the profits that they have and that they get, the proceeds, it goes back to the Blind Federation, a really, really cool organization. This is why focus matters, right? Let's say there's some inputs or something or buttons at the bottom of this experience, and they can only see so much of that, and they need to interact with it or type something, right? And they're focusing with the key, or they're focusing with the keyboard. They're trying to use the tab to move through that experience, but there's no focus, so they don't know where they're at in that experience. That doesn't work. You can't be doing that. So make sure that you always put focus in. So with Aria, we have some examples of managing focus. We have list box, menu, menu bar, radio group for radio buttons. There's tons of info out there, so much info. If you just go to w3.org, you can look it up. You can Google Way Aria or just Google Aria. If you pair what the W3 has, which is the de facto standard, they make all of the standards for us for the web, at least the front end stack. An MDN, that works. Or if you use Can I Use, which you should be using Can I Use all the time, that is the book, right? Of all the new things coming down the pipe from browser vendors, everything we can do today, everything that's deprecated tomorrow, deprecated 20 years ago. IE 11 doesn't support anything. Sorry, Microsoft. I love all of you. But yeah, no, Can I Use, MDN, and the W3 spec. You want to work with all three of those when you're learning about accessibility. Tons and tons of great information. This is a quote from me. Accessibility is not just a requirement. It is a must. This is something you must care about. Most of us, I would assume, are in this because we make good money. Like it's not, we're in IT for the money, right? I'm not going to front. I like, it gets me fed. It's a very privileged thing to say, but we're in this because we do make good money. It's a great career to have. But at the end of the day, I really do this for the users. I really care about the people that are seeing these experiences and hearing from other people that, oh, hey, you built this? I have this type of disability, and because you did this work, I was able to use this. Thank you. Like, that means the world to me. We got to care about these things. I have some resources up there if you want to peep any of those. bit.ly/aria-markup. I'll give you like 5 seconds if you want to take a flick of that. 5, 4, 3. Did you just do some weird AI and just did it? You're awesome. I should use a QR code for that, shouldn't I? Yes. I know. I got to take my own advice that I give you. Is everybody cool with that? Sweet. That's my time. Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you all enjoy the rest of Devnexus today and tomorrow. And yeah, thank you so much.